Hello, welcome to The View from Felaban. I'm Silvia Pavoni, economics editor of the bank, and I'm talking to Claudio Irigoyen, who is the head of Latam research at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Thank you for joining me, Claudio.
Thank you.
So I want to ask you about Chile. Let's start with that. It has surprised many outside of the region and perhaps even in Chile. So what's led to the ongoing social unrest?
It's an interesting case because it doesn't look like Chile was in the bucket of countries where you could expect something like this. It was a country that was growing very nicely at 3%, clearly the outperformer of the region. And all of a sudden we have this social unrest that came out of the government decision to increase 4% the fare on subways. So it doesn't look like it makes a lot of sense to end up having 1 million people in the streets complaining about this. So what happened is that the way the government dealt with the situation at the beginning induced people to use that argument or that manifestation to complain about more things. And now we are in a situation in which is basically the people against the elite, the typical populism clash. And it's not clear how it's going to end up. Some people are talking about that Piñera should resign. Some other people think about the constitutional change as the way out. Everything is very fluid, so it depends a lot on how the government deals with the situation, whether the situation can escalate or can come down from here.
And populism is something that is growing not just in Latin America, of course, but in other parts of the world. Latin America in particular has quite a long tradition, and it has been exposed to this kind of way of governing. What's in the future for a country that has also seen elections in Argentina, which brought in again a Peronist government?
When you go country by country, the threat of populism is still there, if it's not a reality already. So we don't know exactly how Alberto Fernandez is going to look like because he is with Cristina Kirchner, but he is not Cristina Kirchner, so he's been trying to differentiate from Cristina Kirchner in many dimensions. But the most likely scenario is that we're going to have, at least at the beginning, a tilt towards more populism compared to what we had before.
Although some of the names have been thrown around, both for the finance minister and potentially central bank governor, are people that could be not necessarily left-leaning, but quite liberal and open market supporters.
There are many names floating around. I don't think Alberto Fernandez will make any final decision until getting closer to the date he has to take over, which is December 10th. So we're going to have a lot of names flowing here and there. But in any case, the constituency of Alberto Fernandez is still a constituency in which you have 30% of the voting population supporting Cristina Kirchner, and you cannot just ignore them right away. So at the beginning, you're going to have to behave as if you are representing them too. What's going to happen down the road remains to be seen, but that's the story so far. Then you have Brazil and Mexico with populism, but completely different from an economic point of view. So Bolsonaro, it's kind of the right-wing populism that you might have, if you want, in the US or in Europe. In the case of López Obrador, it's a fiscally conservative, lefty government. The question there is if the economy is not growing, whether he will continue being fiscally conservative. In the case of Brazil, it doesn't look like the economy is being affected so far by the populist bias that you can find in Bolsonaro. It's more about minorities and other dimensions, not so much about the economy. In fact, the economy is run by an economic team that is definitely liberal. A lot of people from University of Chicago, so they are doing the right thing, and it's a market-friendly economic team. So it's not about populism in economic terms, it's about populism more in social terms. And then you have Peru and Colombia. In Colombia, the left was very close in the last presidential election. In Peru, you have a massive turmoil, probably elections at the beginning of next year. it doesn't look like you have high chances of ending up with a populist president in Peru, but things are very fluid. So this is probably the opportunity for the left to regroup and have some decent chance. So when you think about the region as a whole, populism has not gone away at all. So it's been transformed over time, but still is still present.
I want to ask you about China as well. Clearly a big trade partner for the region and a big investor. We now have over a dozen countries which have officially signed up to the Belt and Road Initiative. Yep. What's the future in terms of looking at this relationship?
The world has to acknowledge that even if you solve the trade war tomorrow, China will continue decelerating, and it's a structural change. It's not only the deceleration in growth, it's also the change in the composition, more towards consumption and less on investment and infrastructure, which means that the demand for commodities will be more limited compared to what it was 10 years ago. And that means that for Latin America, that was a huge bet on China, Latin America will have to rethink the growth model. And try to diversify more their industries and think about new markets. One way to think about it is what the Mercosur tried to do with this agreement with the European Union. So that conceptually is a move in the right direction. Now it's a matter of whether the new authorities that will run Europe, and in the case of Mercosur, some of the countries, in particular Argentina, will have the incentives and the conditions will be put in place in order for those new authorities to really go ahead and finish the details and implement the agreement in principle. But in theory, that's the way to go. Try to depend less on China and open new markets.
So quite a lot of uncertainty for 2020 for the whole region. Thank you for your comments, Claudio.
Thank you.